Hey there. Thanks for tuning in. You ready for another episode of My Bigfoot Sighting? Alright then, let's do this.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, love's in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.
My Bigfoot sightings are something I think about all the time, especially at night. When I was 7 years old, living on the Fort Peck Indian Reservation in northeast Montana, the town I grew up in those first few years, the backyard was the Missouri River. And me and my friends were constantly down to the Missouri River doing whatever young boys do there. And that one time on a nice warm spring day, we jumped on our homemade bikes and rode down to what we affectionately call the Honda Hills. It was just a series of hills down in the cottonwoods that we took jumps off of. And one morning we got down there a little early. There's 5 of us. And we were going, riding along, hooting and hollering. And when we got to the Honda Hills, we hit the first few jumps, turned around, came back, hit them again. And on the third trip through, my friend in front of me took the jump, and I took it right after him, and he screamed. I mean, not just hollered, he screamed and kicked his bike away. And I hit the ground on my bike, and he was standing there just literally in tears, pointing. And as I followed his finger, that probably, now that I think about it, possibly 20 yards away, there was this figure. And we both were so transfixed by it, we couldn't move. I couldn't move. But there was this figure, and it was just kind of going back and forth from one foot to the other, like looking at us, disappearing, looking at us around a cottonwood tree. And I remember always the eyes with this sighting. He was looking at us, or she, could have been a she. They were looking at us, and he had one hand on the trunk of the tree, and he was on the other side of it, like he would use it to pull himself back and then come back out. But the eyes were amazingly black. And I remember the hair. The sun was behind him, so the hair like shined in the sunlight. And my buddy almost fainted because I was holding him up, and we started to take off. We left our bikes. The other guys took off. And we got home, and I explained to my dad what happened, as did some of the other kids. So some of the adults went back down there with us, although we were scared out of our pants as 7-year-olds. I went down first because it scared me a bit, but I was more amazed by the whole experience. What is this thing? Why is it here? Why doesn't it come to town? Does it live in town? All these 7-year-old questions. But we got there. And my dad said, "Where's your bike?" And I said, "I don't know," because we just ran out of there. But when a little bit of searching, we found my bike up in a tree. It was stuck up in a cottonwood tree. How it got there, I don't know. It was on the ground when I left. And my buddy's bike, we never did find it. But when my dad and the other guys looked around the tree we pointed to, that where we saw it, he came back and was holding his hand at a certain length with the other guys, meaning that they found tracks. And they were some big tracks. I never went to look because, of course, there seemed like to be an invisible wall there that wouldn't let me go past. And so in that experience, I did not know my life would go down this path that it has. And so from that moment, I know my dad told me that you're an outdoorsman, and I always have been. Always been in the woods, always been up on the mountains, always been in the Badlands. And I really think about this a lot, this first experience, and I don't rarely share it with people because of the skepticism now, the things they say, oh, you're just 7 years old. But yeah, I was 7 years old. That also helped me to understand what I was looking at because my mind and vision and stuff wasn't messed up by society yet. So I know what I saw. I know this thing was huge. I didn't think things that big existed. My dad is 6 foot tall, and he held his hand up probably 3 or 4 more feet above his head to say the reason why they know that because there was scratchings on the bark that high. And there's no bears up in Montana in that area along the Missouri, but something there left those marks. So my dad said that he totally believed what I saw, what I felt, and what they smelled. They said there was a smell on the trunk of that cottonwood, possibly where the hand was, but he said there was a certain smell that was pretty bad. So from that moment on, things would change for me, whether I realized it or not in the beginning. So that took place in Montana. And we moved to South Dakota in the mid-70s. And my grandparents lived on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation in South Dakota. And for my grandfather, he always told me of the big hairy people that lived out behind their place up in the hills. And he related stories of when he was young and riding horseback there that they would always hear it, smell it, and then see it. So his horse would be the first thing to alert him to the presence of the big hairy people. And in a way, he told me his horse got trained that way. Any other smell he really wouldn't react to, like a coyote or something. But he said when he smelled it first, the ears would prick up and he'd feel the all of a sudden tenseness under the saddle. And then he'd start looking around. My grandfather would start looking around, and sure enough, he would find it. He would see it. He'd be watching him, from a distance. So always undercover, always in the dark, in the shade of a tree, camouflage, always using the camouflage of the place. So in South Dakota, I've had many experiences, many sightings. Mine weren't just hearing something or smelling something. My experiences were actual physical, seeing Sasquatch, seeing Bigfoot, South Dakota on the reservation. And in that too, as Native Americans, especially there, my grandfather would tell me, don't tell anybody. Because his fear was that would bring people that wouldn't understand him, wouldn't respect him. And to Grandpa, they were a race of people that were here before us. That's what he told me. And then, in fact, we probably the ones that are interfering in their lives. So I would ride horse in the back behind the old place, as we referred to it, my grandparents' place. And when I did, my horse would constantly act up in a certain area, this real dark, deep draw. I'd always try to go through there, but he wouldn't let me because he would smell something. All of a sudden, his head would go back. He'd jerk up and eyes go all wild. And he's trying to rear up and turn around and take off. And here I am trying to hold him there so I could see what's in front of us. And then the one time he stayed long enough for me to see that this log came flying out of the brush. It was part of a old cedar tree, but it came flying out. It didn't hit us. It wasn't aimed at us. It hit a ways from us, but that was a sign. And I remember that looking at my horse, holding him in place there, his nostrils were blowing in and out, and he was stomping on the ground. And I saw long enough that this thing was standing there, but it had light brown hair. I remember the light brown hair in the greenness, because it was springtime in the greenness. And I could see the chest. It was just amazing. It seemed like it took eons to sit there and see this, but it only took a few seconds before my horse took off. And he was going with me or without me. Thank God for his saddle horn. So in seeing this in that brief moment, I went back and told my grandfather, and he said, well, in that area there, that's where they gather wild things to eat. They know what to eat. They know where to get them. And you were in their spot. So my grandfather was a great protector of them. And now, all through these years, I understood that. I understand it now. Why? Because of all the shows that they have now. And to me, they just poke fun at Sasquatch and Bigfoot, these shows they have now. So I too am a protector of Bigfoot. My experiences were to show me that they're there and to show me that in behind my grandparents' old place, that there was sanctuary there. I saw two, had to have been a mother and a juvenile, little one. They were walking through a draw. The only way I saw them was my horse. We were going along the top of this draw, and it stopped and looked down. And there they were. They didn't see me yet. They were just walking along. And so the little one kept picking up or looking at things, and it was like the mom, I guess, would caution him or pull him back. In that moment, I said, she's teaching him. So this wasn't oh my God, it's Bigfoot. No, it was, wow, Bigfoot. And it's calmed me so much as many times as I have seen them. It's calmed me down to know that, yeah, they're there. They're not going to hurt me. Just don't bother them. And she walked with him a ways, and they went into this corner, went around this corner, and I knew this draw, but like the back of my hand. They went around that corner, and they should have took 2 steps, and I would have seen them again, but they were gone. So I rode farther up, and I looked up that draw where they turned up. I should have seen them within 2 steps after they went around the bush, but they were gone. Was there a hole there? I don't think so. I knew that area. People now are saying that Bigfoot could possibly be extraterrestrial. I don't know. All I know is that I was watching her and her little one, and they went around the corner, and then they were gone. So did they know I was there? I don't know. Did they sense me? I don't know. But they were gone. I always went to my grandfather because my dad said, your grandpa may have had more of a relationship than you think with them, a physical relationship. I don't know. My grandfather would calmly tell me about an experience he had. And of course, I was so curious after he'd tell me these things that I would want to go right away, and I would. I'd either walk or I'd saddle up and take off to go to these spots, to go to these ports. And my dad, too. My dad, I know he had more of a relationship than what he was telling me. And Bigfoot in southwestern South Dakota on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation is alive and well. I have friends, too, that protect him. We talk about what we see, what we feel, what we've heard. And in Oglala, he's there. He is there. He travels between the creek bottoms and the hills. And the ranchers know him. The community knows him, knows them. But we don't say, hey, call the Bigfoot groups, tell them to come here. One came, Finding Bigfoot came and did an episode on the reservation, but a lot of the people were a little upset that they came and upset at the people that notified them of it. So try not to be mean. I know that some of the guys that they used to go look to the areas to where they see Bigfoot, they took them to the wrong areas. They took them to the areas that they don't see him, just so that they would come and leave right away. This program. Grateful for it, but at the same time, we didn't need that kind of exposure on the reservation. These Bigfoots aren't bothering us. They're not coming to our towns, our communities, and raising Cain there. But we're going to their country. We're going into their homes and communities and doing that. So out of great respect, we here on the reservation, now that I've said this about Pine Ridge, I want people to know where I'm at, but it's just how we respect the locals, how we respect those that were here before us. That's what I believe. So in that, I became a truck driver, and I drove semi all over Western United States. And in my travels in Utah, I had a friend that lived there, so I would pull into his ranch when I had a little layover, pull in and visit with him, and he would tell me his Bigfoot stories and how they bothered his cows, but not to kill them or anything, but he just chased them around. So in that time of my having these Bigfoot sightings, they didn't have cell phones. They didn't have, cell phone with video or photo camera. This was all in my head and what I saw. And like I said, I am in a nursing home now, but at nighttime when it gets dark, these memories come back every night. All the experiences that I've had that I didn't plan on to have to shape my life, to become part of my environment, my atmosphere. No, I became a part of theirs. And so even in this nursing home, I would look out the window at night and think that I see a Bigfoot watching me from the hill that's behind the nursing home. And how I am now, I'm paraplegic, but I do have my memories of walking, of sitting around a campfire out behind the old place and knowing that there's a Bigfoot up on the hill watching me. And if the moon was out at night, then I could see the outline of him sitting on a hill, a little ways away above me, watching me. So one time I did leave. When I left ashes in the fire, still smoking. And the next morning when I did go back, I rode back, there was water on the ashes. It was watered down. And it was so amazing to me that they knew that was fire. They knew they had to put it out. And I gifted them with some of my grandma's bread that she makes, her hardtop rolls. I left those on a rock. And when I went back the next day, they were gone. Could have been an animal. Anything could have ate that. But I would like to think it was Bigfoot. I would like to think he knew that it was an offering. And there were no tracks around it. If it was an animal like coyote or whatever, I'm sure there'd be tracks. But I circled around, circular around it and made it ever so bigger looking for tracks. And behind these rocks, behind this one log, there were Bigfoot tracks. Like that's a place where they always watched from. I found those there. So I don't know, but like I said, in my life, I've seen Bigfoot in different states, had stories from different states. I wasn't a reporter, an investigator, or anything like that. I'm me, hardworking, raising my family the best way I knew how. And I told my son, I said, I think Bigfoot does that too, raising his family the best way he knows how. And my son is now living in Pennsylvania, another state that's known for their Bigfoot sightings. He's starting to do his weekend investigations out there with a couple of guys he met. And so he's 25 years old. He's had 3 Bigfoot experiences in the Black Hills here, if anybody's familiar with them, here in western South Dakota. We were at a camp one night, at a church camp, sleeping in these cabins that night. And we were both sleeping, and all of a sudden he comes to my bed and he wakes me up. Said, "Dad, there's something outside." And this camp we were in was in this valley, and it had a creek that ran through it, your picturesque panoramic type setting, steep hills on each side, mountains. And he says, "There's something outside." So outside of our cabin, that creek ran. So it was a little noisy, babbling brook, whatnot. You couldn't hear other than that. But he heard something. There was a scratching on the back of the cabin on the screen. So he didn't even look towards that. He just got up and walked into where my bed was. And so we laid there. He got in bed with me. He was just maybe 5 or 6 years old. He got in bed with me. We were laying there. All of a sudden, upside the mountain behind the cabin, we heard a wood knock. 3 of them. Then farther down the valley, we heard 3 knocks. And so my son said, "What was that?" And I explained to him that this was 2 Bigfoots communicating. And so Rapid City, where I'm at now, they're getting more and more sightings reported because people are expanding the community and moving up into the hills with their homes. There was a small outcry of them asking game fish and parks to come in and eradicate the Bigfoot population because they're bothering them. And of course, in our communities, Bigfoot communities, we say, no, we're bothering them. So in that area where we were, there was a steep mountain behind the cabin. And so my first thought was, how is it they're getting through there? Communicating like this in this steep mountain. But then again, of course, that's their country. So the next night, my son said he heard the scratching again on the back of the cabin window. But this time he looked. And he said, that tree, he pointed, that tree right there. He said, something was looking at me. He said it was dark, but he could still see it, the shape, but it was swaying back and forth. And I hear stories now of people saying when they see a Bigfoot, that's what they do. They're behind a tree or a brush or something, but they're going back and forth, swaying. And he said it was just going back and forth. I'd look at it, it'd see me, then go away, it'd see me and go away. But he said all the while, he said he never felt scared of it. He said, I think I saw the eyes, Dad, because they blinked. I saw these two things real quickly go away and come back. To him, that was blinking. And he said it stood there for a while doing that. And then it threw a pine cone because he said something hit the screen and he saw it briefly. He said it was a pine cone. And it hit the floor. So he went and got it. When he was showing me it that next morning, he went and got it and showed me this was a pine cone he threw. Said, well, keep it. That's a keepsake now. So my son grew up Bigfoot. I did. I have 2 grandchildren now, and my grandson he's 7. He lives down in Colorado. He's already talking about going Bigfoot hunting down there. So did I start something good? I think so. But in my life, Bigfoot has been very evident, very present. It's such an amazing creature of sorts. And I'm very grateful for this type of show, for the host to start this. He needs a voice. Bigfoot needs a voice. May not be speaking on the radio, on the phone, but we could be that voice. I could be that voice for him, for more understanding. If I see Bigfoot today, I'd be ecstatic and thank him for giving me the life that I've had, that I didn't get to out there because Bigfoot lives so simply. He's been living off grid all his life. Why don't they make a show about that? He's been living off grid all his life. My grandparents lived off grid all their life. No electricity, no running water. But when my grandfather died, a lot of Bigfoot stories went with him. I never did get the chance to visit with him about what he had physically with them. Like I said, my dad said he had a lot of experience with Bigfoot. So I said, maybe he came up to their house. He lived in a log cabin. But as I grew up and as I kept riding, rode more and more, and of course, and went in the back and went different areas on the reservation, I'd saddle up, load up, go somewhere where people don't go and unload and take off. And I'd get that feeling of being seen. Something's watching me. And I would turn and go in that direction, and I'd hear rocks tumbling down from someplace, or my horse would shy from something. But in my experiences with Bigfoot, you go to the Badlands. And if any of you know what the Badlands look like, they're just desolate area to most people. But to me, it's an abundance of life there. Many different animals live in the Badlands. And if you see them, they're beautiful, absolutely beautiful. But I have reports from tribal policemen traveling through them and seeing things at night, because the Pine Ridge Reservation is the second largest reservation in the country, but it's a vast expanse through the Badlands. Not a whole lot of people live there, but they got reports of Bigfoot crossing the road, a Bigfoot walking out on a flat, and they would watch him, but they wouldn't report it over the radio. I know where 2 places where they had seen him, and it was an area that I frequented quite a bit. There's a stock dam there, and that's where they got their water, because water was a little hard to come by. Water created the Badlands, but it was hard to come by. But they would report seeing where they were, and I would go there. sure enough, Bigfoot tracks by the water's edge. So I would sit there. I would sit there overnight because I had a hard time in my life one time, and the Badlands was a great therapy session down there. But I would sit there and I'd watch them come up to the water. They stayed low in the drainage that came from the stock dam. They'd stay low in that and come up, crawl over the top, get their water in there. It was easy to see them in the moonlight when there's going to be a full moon, because it helped them, I feel, to navigate better in that country by being able to see some of the ground in the full moonlight. But it also helped me because I would watch them. First, I'd see their head peek over. And they always say that, people that see them conical shaped head, and that's what I would see, a cone shaped head. And it would peek over. And the one time I saw it actually peek over and then crawl up, stand up, stretch, and then sit down. And this is something that I don't hear too many people talk about in their stories, but it had some kind of container. Be it man-made, maybe it found it, but it had some kind of container, plastic container, that it dipped it into the water and brought it out and passed it behind him and set it down. And so I was watching that, and here it disappeared. So there must have been one behind him that grabbed it and took it back down in the bottom there. But he sat there for a while and he was looking around. He stood up and stretched his back. And all this I'm just taking in with my head and heart. And it turned. And as it started to walk back down the hill, down this dam face of this talk dam, I could have swore that it waved at me. Because as it walked going the other way, he brought his hand up like a wave, like you're waving at somebody as you're walking away from him. He came up and he kind of moved, his hand moved side to side, and then he put his arm back down and disappeared. So the only person I told of that was the rancher. That was his country. And he'd say, oh, yeah, that's so-and-so. He named them. So if these investigators, maybe I shouldn't say this, but if these investigators really wanted to get a good sighting and have a good experience of Bigfoot, you got to ask the locals, the ones that are around there, and they do. But he says, yeah, that's so-and-so. And said he has a little family down there. He said, I try to leave salt licks out for him. They really like salt licks, like for his cows. They would come up and take a salt lick or a mineral block. And it was just so matter of fact that he explained that. There was no apprehension. There was no sounding nervous or scared. It was just, yeah, well, that's so-and-so. So where I'm from now, western South Dakota, and the country I used to go around in, Bigfoot's there. He'll always be there. I had my physical relationship with him. It wasn't shaking hands or giving hugs and saying it's going to be okay. No, it was just seeing each other. They would see me. They knew my truck. They knew me. And there was no hollering at me, screaming, whatever at me to get me out of the country. We had an understanding. And I firmly believe in the fact that Bigfoot does know us. He does know the humans. That's why he stays away from them. So you know how humans can get sometimes. If they don't understand something, eradicate it, get rid of it. So my brother lives in the state of Washington in the Cascade Mountains. He's had experiences with finding Bigfoot cages that people put up. He said they were really thick bars and really big cages that got maybe forgotten about, because he said he found one that was all rusty. The door was ripped off it. But he said the Cascades were full of people putting Bigfoot cages up. And he didn't understand that either. And he worked at a fishery out there and managed a fishery for the state of Washington. And he'd say, that he'd put fish out for Bigfoot at certain times, especially if there was a drought or if he knew the fish weren't running, that he would put some out because that was part of their diet. He kept feeding them just so that the little ones wouldn't starve. So that's a wholehearted belief in Bigfoot. I don't make Bigfoot jokes. I don't make fun of them. I don't allow people to make fun of them. I'll stop them if they start. So there's not a whole lot of understanding out there for Bigfoot. The closest I've had Bigfoot to me, other than at the time I was 7, it was like 5 feet. I'm a hunter-gatherer. That's how I was raised. Take care of the people. Take care of my grandparents. Take care of the family. Go hunting in the fall and winter and gather in the summer berries and wild turnips and plums and chokecherries, all of that in the summertime. But I was getting some chokecherries with my son. And we went down in this deep draw, down at the bottom where these bush and chokecherry bush. So we went down in there, parked at the top, walked down in there and had our buckets, and we were filling them up with black chokecherries. In August, every year in August is the time to get those. But we're doing this, and my son touches my elbow. No sudden movement, just kind of touched my elbow with his finger. I looked back at him, and with his eyes, he made that motion to look left and kind of tilted his head a little bit. And so I knew what he was signaling. So I just glanced over and saw the top of a Bigfoot head, but not like a big Bigfoot, like a juvenile. Because big Bigfoots really don't get caught too much, but juveniles do because they don't know yet. So they're always out there very curious, I feel. But it was standing there. I could tell it seen us because its head was faced towards us. And I saw one of the eyebrows. So I pretended not to see it, told my son, I said, wana, iwo. In our language, that means come on. So I said that in that way, and I let him go in front of me, and I glanced back again. But this time, it was like paralleling us. It was following us on the outside of the brush as we were on the other side. And I could hear it walking. I could hear it breathing. And as we got toward the top, I grabbed a branch that had chokecherries on it, and I threw it towards the direction of this young one. And just to let him eat what was on the branch, the chokecherries on the branch. But we got to the top of the hill, back to the truck, and my son was watching it from there because I was eating chokecherries. That we were in its area. That's where it was gathering chokecherries too. And it was just so amazing to see this junior form of something that could get 8 to 9 to 10 feet tall, standing there like a child, just making noises and eating chokecherries. So, like I said, nowadays I'd be more ecstatic than scared to see another one. I firmly believe that I was part of a Bigfoot tribe back there, my whole family, from my grandfather on down, maybe even past generations before him in that area. I believe we were part of that tribe. We were accepted. I was accepted. No bluff charge or, like I said, hooting or hollering or throwing things at me. It was just a mutual respect, I guess. So now that I'm 58 years old and trying to get my walking back and all of that, so I can get back into the country and see who's left or go behind the old place, because my grandparents died in the late 80s, my grandfather and grandmother, and I miss them greatly. Talk about teachers. They taught without words. So I think this avenue of being able to explain my experiences, my sightings, hopefully will give people a better understanding of the fact that as I grew up Native American. I grew up a child of God, child of Christ, and also a child of Bigfoot. And to this day, I have warm feelings for him, and I get so upset at some of these shows that come on TV. To me, they look scripted or faked evidence. because some of the stuff they find, I know Bigfoot would not do. At least the ones I knew, they wouldn't be so blatant and get seen so much. But I'm trying to recall other stories that I've had, other sightings. But for me, it kind of brings out some form of PTSD in remembering some of these sightings. They weren't, like I said, they weren't scary, but it would just get me so excited to think about them. And I did have one or two sightings in northern Idaho on the Nez Perce Reservation that actually kind of frightened me. And one was the fact that I was with these two guys, and what they first saw and heard was something they're used to, but I wasn't. But they said the Bigfoot that we experienced and saw was actually probably 12 feet tall. And anything that goes by 10 feet or higher, I always try to look at it as the height of a basketball goal. Basketball goals are 10 feet tall. I'm 5'8". So I try to, when they said it was 12 feet tall, I right immediately looked like at the height of a basketball goal. And I said, my goodness, that's 2 feet higher than 10 feet. My goodness. I was looking at that and here, as we stood there, and they were perfectly calm about it. And I was the one that, because I didn't know that country, that wasn't my country, but we're in their country, and here I got hit by a rock, not hard, kind of like you just kind of throw it up in the air and it comes down. I don't think they were aiming for me, but hit me right on top of the head, and I really flinched. And I told those guys, "Can we go now?" And they said, "No, it's going to leave soon." But as I sat there, I told them, I said, "Something's grabbing my arm. There's something grabbing my arm." And then they said, "Stand still. Don't jerk away." But the thing of it was, we were around a fire. The nearest brush was at least 10 feet away. And something was grabbing my arm, and I couldn't see it. And afterwards, I told the one guy that I said I could not see what was grabbing. I said, "Yeah." He said, they can become transparent. They can travel that way. And I sat there for a while around the fire and realized that that's probably what that was, because I could feel fingers around my arm. Fingers and a thumb. They weren't jerking, they weren't pinching, they were just like just a very slight touch. And I felt that feeling for a few seconds. And it was after that, so that was my first physical touch from a Bigfoot, I feel. Because I could feel the fingers, big hand, big whatever it was around my bicep. So that guy said, if he wanted to, he could have jerked you back and we would never seen you again. So I said, well, he didn't. But I was visiting friends in Idaho on the reservation when that happened. And that was the only time it happened in Idaho. But I have friends, those friends still say, yeah, he's still around. They're here. He said, they're here. But once again, you don't see a whole lot of Bigfoot shows being done on some reservations for that very reason. They don't want to bother them. So if we had more understanding and less skepticism of something that, because it doesn't join our parties and doesn't come to our events, to know that he's here. So I'm not anything other than I was a hardworking, lunch bucket carrying, blue collar worker, trying to raise my family. But these experiences, I felt, really helped me to stay in the game, to stay what I needed to do to keep me doing what I had to do to raise my family, because that's what they were doing. So there's not one sighting and you go, oh my God, it's a monster. It's going to kill us. No, it's something that's trying to preserve its way of life. And that's the same thing us Native Americans are trying to do. Preserve our way of life. So we struggle. They struggle. Bigfoot struggles. And when society advances, and they call it progress, into making the cities bigger, the communities bigger, trying to get away from the communities by going into a country they don't know to build a home, and then wonder why they're being bothered. So I'm almost done here telling you guys about these sightings. Yeah, like I said, they were sightings. They weren't stuff told to me. These are sightings. I've had them all my life. All my life. And my son is starting to have them. My grandson is 7 years old, lives in Colorado, lives in Denver. But he's wanting me to come down there, and so we can go Bigfoot hunt. Unless they build an all-terrain wheelchair, you probably have to be through Zoom. Have him get out there, and then I'll tell him what to look for. But at this time, I'd like to just stop. I'm having all these memories come back to me, and I know I don't want to bore some of the listeners, but you're listening for a reason, because maybe you've had your experiences and stories and sightings. Just understand Bigfoot. So I'm telling you guys, he's out there. He's alive and well. So keep on squatching.
Well, that's it for tonight's show. If you've had a Bigfoot sighting and would like to be a guest, please go to mybigfootsighting.com and let us know. Thanks for listening. Have a great night.
Seen a bunch of rundown no-horse towns where the church is the backbone, loves in the plow, and the five-string melodies grooving, with the farmland rows where the roots run deep, beyond the noise of the busy streets, where the songs of the South are soothing. When I hear the front porch picking down, home rhythm ringing out, I don't run from banjo music. Yeah.